Hello everyone, Chris Peterson here, bringing you my fourth and final game from the 2014 Denver Chess Club Championship. This time I'm going to be playing local expert David Hartsook, who is rated 2071. David Hartsook has an interesting style. He plays really sharp openings, things like the Budapest and the Open Sicilian, but then he'll play a safe variation of that, which leads to generally equality, and he's a master at defending difficult positions. Kind of similar to a bulldog, he'll latch on to a weak point in your position or a strong one in his, and just kind of weather the storm. It can be really frustrating watching your advantage slip away under his tenacity. I have a couple games against him where I just couldn't figure out how I threw away the win. My strategy going into this game in particular was to play something kind of offbeat. David likes to use his time, and getting him into something unfamiliar will eat away at his clock. So I was black, so I guess I'll just flip the board so we can see it from my side. Actually, I want to turn on the analysis engine before I get too far. So he started with e4. And we've played a lot of games where I play like the Sicilian Dragon, and he'll play the modern theory of that. And the games are really interesting. But I wanted to keep things a little bit offbeat, so I played knight c6, which is a little bit strange opening move, but it can transpose into a lot of different things. So David played d4. And then I played e5, d5, knight c to e7, and this is starting to get into two knights tango territory, which is something I'm pretty familiar with. So David played knight f3 here. He could try f4 maybe, but after, I don't know, I could just take this and probably be okay, because I'm gaining tempos on the bishop already, and black is doing fine. But instead he played knight f3, and then I went knight g6, knight c3, knight f6. So this is definitely a two knights tango now, and typically black will just develop his bishop, maybe hide the bishop back on a7, and then just castle kingside, and the pressure builds up on white's kingside pretty quickly. So David played a3. He doesn't want to allow my bishop to occupy the b4 square. So instead I played bishop c5. David gained a tempo with b4, so I just backed up. And now bishop e2. And we can start to see how David has played very aggressive expanding moves, but he's also kind of played it a bit safe with a move like bishop e2. He could have tried bishop c4 just to put his bishop on a more active square, but I mean, things are already starting to go in black's favor at this point. So he went bishop e2, and then I went pawn to d6, and now David played h3, and now you can really start to feel David's style coming out here. He's playing it really safe. He's taking away the g4 square, which would have been nice for either my knight or my light square bishop. But he's using time that he could have spent developing his pieces to take away squares from my pieces. So he's already kind of playing just kind of a reactive style of chess rather than like a retroactive, I guess. Actually, I don't know what the right term, proactive, something like that. So I just castled here, and I'm already starting to seize the advantage here because white has kind of played a more passive opening. So David played queen d3. He wants to challenge my dark square bishop with bishop e3. And now I played knight h5, and quite simply, I'm just trying to occupy f5, which will make his... He'll probably have to trade his bishop for one of the knights, and then my knight's just going to sit on f4 the rest of the game, and it's going to be a real thorn in his side. So white is already a little bit desperate to keep control of the dark squares around his king, so he plays g3. And now suddenly things are starting to open up, and white is ill-prepared. His king's still in the center. He's made a tremendous amount of pawn moves. I've only made, let's see, I've made 1, 2, 3 pawn moves, where David has played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So he's already made 7 pawn moves. And one of my kind of guiding principles for the opening is not to make too many pawn moves, because for every pawn move you make, you're doing a few things. One, you're not developing a piece. 2, you're weakening squares, and you're weakening squares. And then 3, you're just not getting your king to safety quick enough, and that's starting to come out for sure here. So 3 pawn moves to 7, so I think black is doing really well here, and the computer tends to agree. So here, let's say David tries to play bishop e3. This is going to be a real problem for him, because now this g3 pawn is going to be undermined. So, for example, if bishop takes bishop, he can't play pawn takes, because then knight g3. So he has to play queen takes, but then f4, gf4, knight takes f4, and now we can see black just has complete domination on the king side, and white has already pushed his queenside pawns, so there's really no safe haven for white's king. Let's see, the pawn on h3 is hanging. After moves like queen f6, the pressure down the f-file is going to be pretty overwhelming. I think black is very clearly better in this position. So instead of playing that, David played bishop to g5, just trying to gain 1 extra tempo to get further developed. And then I played queen e8, and somehow white has wound up with kind of a, I don't know, it's cramped, target-riddled position. His king side and center are collapsing, which is just absolutely devastating here. So David tried e takes f5, and every chess game has multiple critical moments for both sides, and figuring out over the board when those moments occur can be difficult. I realized during the game that this here in particular was a really critical moment, and when those times come about, you really have to slow down and spend as much time as necessary to find the correct move and plan. After e takes f5, this is a critical moment for black, and I really should have slowed down and put a lot more thought into this move. During the whole game, I used about 34 minutes on my clock, and I should have used some of that time here. I have this nasty habit of using stale analysis when critical moments arise, and it has cost me several games, or caused me to miss really, really devastating moves. I need to practice recalculating and slowing down in those critical moments, and more than likely you do as well. So keep that in mind when you are playing a game. When you think a critical moment happens, really kind of slow down and calculate it. I only spent about 5 minutes on this move, which is not nearly enough time. If I had spent a little more time, then I would have found the correct line, because I had already been analyzing that move, the correct move. In previous videos, I mentioned time-saving tricks, like look for tactical or positional themes to quickly sort out good moves from bad moves. That all goes out the window when one of these critical moments comes about. Spend your time, calculate as thoroughly as possible. Here's what I missed in the game. So if I play bishop takes f5, one of my very serious move considerations, if he tries blocking, then I have a really beautiful tactic here with knight hg4. Well, either knight can go to f4, but knight g4 I guess is slightly better. And now if g takes f4, e takes f4, bishop e6, bishop takes e4, and now black has won an extra pawn, and the attack is still raging. Like after the queen moves, then pawn takes bishop, and I don't know, black is just winning in this position. So if instead of queen d2, he tries, let's see, oh, sorry, instead of knight e4, let's say he tries queen d2. Then a simple move like knight f6, getting out of this g4 fork. Bishop e3, now knight e4. Knight e4, bishop e4. And suddenly this f3 knight is going to be a problem. And once again, black is up a pawn. Clearly winning for black. White has no safe squares for his king. The pressure is just going to keep building on this f file here. So instead of all that, I had this brilliant idea to create open lines, and it's not a bad move. It's just not quite as sound as the bishop takes f5 line. I played e4, and the main idea is to open up this, open up the e file, and consequently the f file as well. So it's not a bad move. The major downside is that it allows a trade of queens, which kind of blunts the attack a little bit. So if he plays knight takes f4, then bishop takes f5, it's just totally devastating. This knight is just going to drop, probably. So if he tries something like knight here, then bishop takes f2 is going to be devastating, so he can't allow that to happen. So instead, he has to play queen takes. And then after queen takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes f5. Then David found a good move. He played knight f to d2. And the main idea behind this is just to try to keep the e file as clogged as possible, so he can get his king to safety. Now that there's two pieces on the row, or on the file, my rook a to e8 pin is not doing too much. Now, my original analysis, which was kind of stale at this point, was to play bishop takes f2, and this is the computer line, and it's by far the best move. But I chickened out because I wasn't sure after knight takes f2 that I was going to get enough for the piece. But after knight takes g3, rook g1, knight e2, king e2, rook a to e8, we can start to see that white's in a lot of trouble. If he tries coming up with the king, for example, h6, and this bishop has nowhere to go. The knight covers these two squares. Oh, sorry, I meant king d1 and then h6, and now the bishop has no squares, so he's going to have to give the piece back. And then black is still doing really well. So instead, if he so let's see what happens if he goes king up. Then h6. Let me get rid of these. So then the computer says to just take the pawn, but let's say he tries to hang on to the piece. Now bishop takes c2, and which is check. So he has to get out of this, and then the bishop is going to fall again anyway. So there isn't really any decent way to hang on to the piece in that position. So bishop takes f2, knight g3, takes, check. So instead, if he tries to block with the bishop, then knight f4 check, king f3, knight takes d5, and again, white is in a lot of trouble here. It's hard to find decent squares. So let's say he tries to save the piece with bishop d4. Bishop g6, which is check, king g2, now rook e2, and suddenly everything is under attack. So, I don't know, maybe knight f3, knight f4, king f1, something like this. And even though white is up a piece at the moment, black already has 3 pawns for it. And white's king is still in a lot of trouble. So so I shouldn't have chickened out at that point. And it was another point where I should have spent more time. But I was just moving quickly because I saw that I had I don't know, my position just felt really strong, so I could play so I just felt like I could play quickly. So here David played bishop takes h5. He has a chance here to actually castle, and that kind of gets him out of a lot of trouble. And then after bishop e4, knight e4, something like this. Then rook e5, hitting these two. I don't know, the red squares are better. Bishop g6, maybe something like this. And I don't know, maybe rook c3. And black is probably still better, but I mean it's opposite color bishops, so it's going to be a lot more difficult to win this, it seems. Okay, so but David played bishop takes h5, so he missed his chance to get out of danger there. But so I just played bishop takes e4. After knight takes e4, rook takes e4, king d1. Now, I couldn't decide which pawn to take. I have the chance to take the d5 pawn or the f2 pawn. And in hindsight, taking the f2 pawn looks a lot more appetizing. It brings my rook forward, and it kind of keeps white's king in a lot of danger. But I also like the idea of taking the d5 pawn, because then my bishop becomes active on f2, which you'll see in a moment. So I decided rook d4 check, king c1, rook d5, and now f4 is really the only decent move. If bishop takes g6, then rook takes g5, and the f pawn is going to drop anyway, so there's no point in any of that. So David played f4, and now simply bishop f2, and now one of these pawns is going to drop. I'm either going to check and pick up this pawn, or just take this pawn for free. So this particular variation is why I went into taking the d pawn. I figured it would be winning at least a pawn, and I would be able to keep my sights on the rest of the weakened white king side. So David played bishop f2, just kind of threatening to pin my rook. But after king h8, David's really in a bad spot here. And the early and middle game complications kind of left David with very little time. He was down to just 6 minutes. And in the time pressure, David made a critical mistake. He played bishop f3. I played rook takes g5, fg5, rook takes f3. King d2. So it's just a slight oversight by David, but now black's position is just it's just completely winning it. It's almost impossible to lose this position now. So then rook h f1, bishop f4 check. So I want to be able to take the rest of his pawns, but my king is still on the back rank and could be checkmated at any time, so I have to be careful about that. Bishop f4 check, king e2, rook takes h3, rook f3, now rook h5. I could also just trade rooks and probably win that game, win that ending. But one of my losses to David was really embarrassing. I had a position similar to this. I was just totally winning. But instead of having an extra rook, it was just knight and bishop versus rook. And we were both in time pressure, and somehow his rook just completely destroyed me. It just kept taking pawns. It was threatening everything. It was just just dreadful. And my only real excuse is that playing with a rook is easier in time pressure than with the two pieces. But I mean, come on, that's pathetic, right? So here I had to decide what I should do because I can't move my bishop because I would get checkmated. So I decided I'm going to go into the simplest ending that I could possibly get into and have no chance of losing whatsoever. So I just played rook takes g5, allowing David to win the two pieces for a rook back. But in that case, that would leave me with these two protected pass pawns, connected pass pawns. And that is so simple. I could do it with, I don't know, 1 second on my clock with a 1 second delay or something. It's super simple. But I had plenty of time at this point. I think I still had half an hour or more. But again, playing in other people's time pressure is I don't know, it's weird. So in this case, I just wanted to make the win as simple as possible. And I mean, that's generally the plan, but it doesn't always work that way. So David played rook takes, knight takes, rook takes. Then simply king g8, stop any back rank shenanigans from happening. Rook c4, and then rook e5 check. And David resigned here in view of just rook e7, and then my h and g pawns are just going to roll up the board. So with that, I won all 4 games at the Denver Chess Club. I ended up a full point ahead of the rest of the field. I feel like my play was energetic and powerful, but with some kinks that need to be pounded out. So the next tournament I plan to play in is the Loveland Open, which is in about a week, and I hope I can keep the momentum going and perform well there and show you guys some interesting games, hopefully wins over strong opponents like these last two. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.